I would like to call the School Committee of Foxborough's regular meeting on October 15th, 2012 to order now. The agenda will read visitors, approval of minutes. We have several tonight, executive and regular. Teaching and learning highlights with an 8th grade science video density by Ms. McDonough and Ms. Tetro. Facilities manager transition. We are meeting our new manager tonight. MCAS overview, superintendent's goals 2012 to 2013, and October 1st enrollment update. Mrs. Slattery is not able to be with us tonight, and Martha, if you are listening, we shall miss you, and we hope you have a speedy recovery. Are there any visitors? Joe?
Good evening, I'm Joseph Garrity. I'm from Foxborough High School. I was just wondering, in the MCAS, do they include special education scores too?
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, approval of minutes. Executive session meeting of August 13, 2012. Are there any additions, corrections, or comments?
Motion to approve.
Second?
All in favor? 4-0. Executive session meetings of August 27, 2012. Any additions, corrections, or comments?
Motion to approve.
Second?
All in favor? 4-0. One person is absent. Executive session meeting, September 17, 2012. Any additions, corrections, or comments?
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
All in favor?
We're on a roll here.
4-0.
I don't want to interrupt this.
Very smoothly.
And now for our regular meeting of October 1, 2012. Are there any additions, corrections?
I actually had one comment that I wanted to raise for the committee's remembrance or consideration of how the discussion went, but I know the Turf's Up field project has gotten a lot of press and interest lately, and I just want to make sure that we reflect accurately the discussion we had at our last meeting. The comment in the minutes is that I moved and Martha seconded that we work in support of Turf's Up field project and support funding the project on a town warrant. The word I'm not sure I remember is the funding word. I'm not sure. I remember saying that we would support funding the project on a town warrant. I just wonder if it's better stated that we would support having the project on a town warrant or putting forth the project on a town warrant.
Right, I think that would be correct to do that. What we supported was it being presented to the town through a warrant for public discussion.
Yes, and if I remember correctly, Martha had brought up the discussion about putting in language regarding the funding, and we were corrected by Bill saying that the funding source is not to be included because it's really, it's something that we need to obviously discuss with the municipal side. So I think that it's a great point, Bruce. I'm glad you
So how
brought that up.
would you like?
How about just to work in support of the turf field project and support a warrant, an article on the town warrant?
So what would we like to take out of this? Funding possibilities?
Just take the word funding out, and I think you're still accurate.
Well, it's used twice in this.
I would say, so I think your original, Bruce, when you said support, putting the project forward or putting forth the
Yeah.
project through a town warrant.
Yes, because that's what we were
Putting
supporting.
forth the project through a town warrant.
We support I think there was a consensus and that we support the notion of the community voting on whether they want
Through a
the
town
turf
warrant?
project.
Through a town warrant?
Right, I think the committee's discussion was that, as most people know, unless you don't attend town meeting, which I guess there are a few people in town that don't, but somebody has to sponsor each warrant article. So what this committee did, in my view, is agree to sponsor that warrant.
And maybe
that
that's
warrant
exactly,
article.
and maybe, Debbie, that's the right wording.
Sponsor.
Work in support of the Turf's Up field project and support sponsoring the project on a town warrant. or forget support. Work in support of the Turfs Up Field project and support,
sponsor.
and sponsor the project on a town warrant.
That's accurate.
You got that, Wendy?
Yep.
Sorry to play semantics, but.
No, I think in
No,
this
but it's
case,
better to
it's
have it
important that
accurate.
we do that.
Well, I will entertain, any other comments or suggestions? I will entertain a motion to accept these as amended.
Make the motion.
Katie?
I
need a
second that.
Tina? All in favor of accepting the October 1, 2012 minutes as amended? 4-0. Thank you very much. Here we go. Looking forward to teaching and learning highlights.
Yes, I would love to invite Ms. Diane McDonough and Principal Sue Abrams up to the guest table. We regret that the second 8th grade science teacher, Ms. Tara Tatro, is not here tonight. She is ill as well, so we wish her well. But this teaching and learning highlight, I'm just smiling because it's a fun one, but I saw this in my travels around the school. I was visiting the Ahern, and Mrs. Abrams and I went to their classes. And I'm just going to put it simply, and then let them take over the explanation. To me, I said this has to be a teaching and learning highlight because to me it illustrates so many things, but first and foremost, the lengths that our teachers will go to help students remember, understand, and love science and their content. And so when I saw it, they were gracious enough to say that they would let this be shown publicly because it was something created for students, and I give them all the credit. And so you've seen them here before with robotics and some other exciting things they do, and this is the same theme of exciting things our science teachers are doing over there at the Ahern Middle School.
So just some background before we show the video. This was actually our second music video. Tara and I made one on metric system conversion. We noticed after doing some student check-ins that students were struggling with conversions. So we created a music video based on the song Vacation by the Go-Go's. And it seemed to help students. Its scores on their quizzes actually improved substantially. We had very few failures on scores. So we decided for density, why not introduce density using a music video? And we sang the song in front of them with the video and then asked them questions as an intro. So this is the song they got as an introduction to density.
I hope it stars Mrs. Abrams.
No. I'm background support.
Background vocals?
No, not even that.
Not even.
Funny thing is, that's what I call them, is the dynamic duo. And when I saw the video, I thought, oh, that's really apropos. That's what's important.
You can find density, the work it is so easy. You'll need mass and volume, and now you're on your way. Use your balance to get mass for solids, liquids, and gas. A union for mass is gram, and now you're on your way. Collecting this data gives you how much matter is in a given volume. Now you know what you're measuring. Hey, mass over volume. The math is easy. Solve for the number. Call it density. It's measured in grams per milliliters. Solve for the number. Call it density. Hey, mass over volume. The math is easy. Solve for the number. Call it density. It's also measured in grams per cubic centimeters. Solve for the number. Call it density. Volume is how much space that big cylinder in place. You can fill it up halfway, but you're still on your way. Volume is what you need. The meniscus you need. The unit is milliliter. Now you're on your way. Collecting this data gives you how much matter is in a given volume. Now you know what you're measuring. Hey, mass over volume. The math is easy. Solve for the number. Call it density. It's measured in grams per milliliters. Solve for the number. Call it density. Hey, mass over volume. The math is easy. Solve for the number. Call it density. It's also measured in grams per
some of her signature moves.
It's measured in grams per milliliters. So for the number, call it density. Hey, mass over volume. The math is easy. So for the number, call it density. It's also measured in grams per cubic centimeters. So for the number, call it density. Before you came into my life, I measured so bad. I measured so bad. I measured so bad. Before you came into my life, I measured so bad. And you should know that. So call it density.
Yes, even they include bloopers.
It's measured in grams per milliliters. For the number, and call it density, volume. The math is easy. So for the number, and call it density, it's grams per cubic centimeters. So for the number, come and measure in. Hey, mass over volume. It's so bad. Before you came into my life, I measured so bad, and you should know that I measured so. Select in this data gives you how much matter is in a given volume. Now you know when you're measuring. Hey, mass over volume. The math is easy.
And then it's their turn to sing, so we hand out the copies of the song and we make the students sing. And they were actually quizzed on density on Friday, and numerous students commented that they had that song stuck in their head as they were taking the quiz.
And numerous parents mentioned knowing the lyrics to the song just as well as the children, because they sang it at home as well in preparation.
I had the song stuck in my head all weekend. I was humming it. But not only the extent that they'll go for kids, obviously they love children, so that came out, but the collaboration. So no matter what house your child is in, that those teachers are collaborating, doing whatever it takes, and I just thought it was such a great example of what our teachers do to help students learn that I just had to show it publicly.
Yeah, so we're working on our third video. We have students who actually want us to create a website with the video, so that might be in the near future.
It might go viral.
That's
what I'm anticipating.
It reminds me of the Schoolhouse Rock videos I grew up with, and I still remember those.
Yes.
So you're a legend. That's great. That's fabulous.
Well, one of the things that Tara and Diane do in science is they look at the data and they look at how the students are learning, and they identify a problem, being the scientists that they are, and try to improve student achievement. And the first thing I think they tried a few years ago was the interactive notebook. And so each time a group of students doesn't perform well, they will try something different. And this has the technology twist. And now the signature moves and the bloopers and all that. And,
That's great.
It's just something that the kids enjoy, and it's a nice model for the kids for, doing their products as well. And I don't know if you wanted to show where this led today.
Yeah, so today, I don't know if you want to click on video using vernier probes. So if you want to show the first video. Today was our first day using the vernier probes. We introduced the students to them. They're not able to do it. And they're actually very interactive with the probes. And a lot of them said it was great. It was like having a computer right at their fingertips. So it's just a 1-minute video.
Left hand, 3, 2, 1.
See, if I had this, I would have actually learned science.
This is the first time they've been in middle school, the first time students have been exposed to them. And it was just a temperature. They were trying to compare the difference between their left hand and right hand, the temperatures.
Oh, it's green.
And it's graphing right on there for them to see.
Which makes a connection to the math classes, which is the graphic.
And then once it finishes collecting the data, they can actually analyze it with the statistics button.
Okay, minimum 23.2, and your maximum was 25.
So then they talk about minimum and maximum temperatures that they've obtained. And this is just from their first exposure to it, but they actually, that was within 20 minutes, they were actually able to do it on their own. And interact, they were problem solving on their own, and you could hear a pin drop because they were so engaged in using the probes.
Oh, exciting.
I think it's just another great example that sometimes when we say, we're using more and more technology in the classroom, people maybe traditionally tend to think that means you're at a computer station or, something that you think of, but we have so many different technologies that support learning in the classroom, and there's two good examples, video and vernier probes. I think I might have actually maybe liked science a little bit more if it had been this interactive and exciting when I was in school, rather than just reading chapters. So notice you like the video, Willie. So maybe there'll be, you don't know what's going to happen. Actually, my daughter remembers from high school science, Mr. Charpentier uses an old song like from my generation. I don't know if it's I'll have to remember what it is, I should. But for a chemistry equation to remember it, she can still sing it. So, good for you. I loved it.
That's great.
Great.
Thank you for sharing
Thank
it
you.
with us.
Thank you so much for what you guys do. And when you speak to Tara, wish her well and tell her to hurry up and get back.
Okay,
right.
thank you.
Thanks so much.
Okay, facilities manager transition.
Yes, I would love to invite our new facilities manager, Tony Musali, up to what we call the guest table. Welcome.
Hello, everybody.
Welcome.
Thank you.
We've talked a lot about the transition from Mike O'Leary to Tony, and we thought we would have him come. So I don't know if have you met all the committee members? I don't think so. So
No.
we could have a quick go around so you know who everybody is, and then we'd love to hear a little bit about your transition.
Tony and I had an opportunity to meet in
Yep.
the central office. I've got 2 kids, Tony, in middle school.
Very good. Very
I'm Katie Adair, and I have 3 that have gone through the school, 1 left who's a junior in high school.
And I'm Bevy Lord, former teacher, and my son graduated from Foxborough High School in 1997.
And I'm Tina Bellinger, and I have a 5th grader and a 7th grader at the Ahern.
Excellent.
Nice to
Very
meet
good.
you.
Well, it's a pleasure be able to, work with the administration team. I'm very happy to, and look forward to, keeping up with Mike would, have done, and even bring it up to another level, and just make it a better place to be, and it's just a great environment. Places are in great shape, just going to keep them going, and like I said, it's great. You guys have a great team here, and I'm happy to come aboard.
In comparison with some of your other jobs, when you walked in and found this facility as it is and what was going on, how did you have a...
Well, usually I haven't had too many jobs in my past, but usually when I do have a job, it's like, here you go, here's the keys and good luck, But, it was a pleasure having Mike here for 3 weeks. We spent some time together, and, he showed me the ins and outs, and like I said, it was a very great transaction, and we just keep it going, Just put out fires, keep everybody warm, and the safety, and that's what it's all about.
Well, we're going to try to arrange not too many fires for you.
Well, no, we don't, but the stage you gotta put them out.
None would actually be good.
Yeah, I didn't really mean fires, I just meant
Well, yeah, the crises moments or
crisis moments.
bombing breaking or anything
Yeah.
like that.
But, so, it's a great environment here, and all the staff and the teachers, and I got to go around and meet all the principals, and like I said, it's very good, and the kids are wonderful too. It's very well-behaved school system, that I could see anyway.
It's been a really smooth transition. I don't know if you want to comment.
Yeah, I think, again, I think we were very fortunate that you guys supported us having, whoever we had selected to come in and work with Mike for a few weeks. I know the overlap in salary, obviously, is always an issue, but it's seldom that you can actually put a team together incoming and outgoing type of thing, where you can get the benefits of what the previous person has done. I think you all know we respected Mike's abilities and what he's accomplished over the last 10 or so years that he's been with the district. So, in a lot of ways, as I told you before, we were very fortunate in Tony's background matching a lot of Mike's previous background before he came to the district. So, having been in working for the Flatley Company in their medical side of things for 17 years, 13 years?
19.
19 years, okay. I think that gives a great basis for understanding, one of the prime things that we've always come to appreciate in the last, number of years with Mike being here, and that is cleanliness and safety. And so I think, those two are really drummed into people that are in that industry. And then after that, obviously, his background going into both the college level and having to do major renovations within a facility he had there, and then also being in the Hanover schools for a couple years, which actually was an added plus to us because we had someone who understood, the purchasing and procurement side of things and the way we have to react to public versus being in the private sector. So it was actually fun to watch Tony and Mike kind of go through those last 3 weeks and really get through. And Mike has been around a couple days, but Tony has just continued to move right along. And I think one of the things that was nice to hear, coming from Tony, we all feel this way, but you'd like to get some validation, and that was after he went through all the facilities, basically saying, even though we have projects like the borough to continue working on, the status of our schools and the condition that they're in is far better than what he's seen in other districts, and I think that's very important. I mean, I think that's one of the things we strive for, but and the town's put a lot of money towards that, helping us as far as these programs, but it's important that we're actually accomplishing it, and I think we feel we are, but it's good to have somebody who now has to live in that environment, basically saying he's comfortable that's what we handed over to him. So I think overall it's been a great transition. I really think we did well.
All right.
Happy to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you again, everybody.
Tony, just
Sure.
I want you to know that as a committee, as a town, the town has done a great job supporting the facilities in the schools long before I was here, certainly, and I've seen that in the short time I've been here now too. And so I want you to feel very comfortable coming to the committee, through Bill and Debbie anytime, and telling us what things you see and how we can continue to enhance what we have. As I said, the town's always been very supportive of that, and we don't always fund everything we'd like to do, but we usually find a way over time to make it happen. So please feel like you have our support, the town's support, and we're delighted you came to Foxborough. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, and I appreciate it. It's good to see everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tony.
Thank you. Okay, MCAS overview.
Yes. As the committee knows, in the past, we've had a two-part MCAS presentation, and Dr. Bordos is going to be doing that. So we're going to keep with what we started a few years ago, which is tonight on, we'll call it MCAS Part 1. It is the overview that Amy's going to do of the global results for the district, a little bit more than global in detail. And then she'll come back 2 weeks from now with the department heads and the curriculum coordinators and talk about the trends over time. They come with their MCAS trend summary statements and talk really about what these results you heard tonight mean for their curriculum revision and how it informs our curriculum instruction and assessment. And typically, in the last few years, what we've also done at that same meeting, which would be Part 2 the next time, is we've included the baselines and benchmarks report. But we are, as you know, we've discussed at this table, converting that into a district report card. So when Amy's finished with that tonight, we'd like to tell you what plans we have for that conversion and why things are going to be a little bit different with that, because that is on a strategic plan to have a district report card. The meat of it is in the baselines and benchmarks report, but there are some things that are going to change in it just because everything's changing on the national level. So after she's finished tonight, we'll tell you a little bit about that in the future. So I'd like to turn it over to Amy for our MCAS report.
All right. Well, it is that time of year. You have a lot of information in your packet to digest looking at 17 different assessments that are given in MCAS from grades 3 through 10. We overall are pleased with what we see as far as our progress over time with English language arts, math, and science. We put a lot of energy into some very particular areas, and we can see some improvement in those areas based on that focus. And then we also see some areas that we're continuing to focus on Where we might not see is great as growth as we'd like to see at this point. We see the growth, but we really aim high and want to see it higher. So in your packet, you had the performance over the last several years for each of those grade levels for math, ELA, and science. And then the cohorts looking at the same grade, because we have to remember that each year the test is different. And each year when we look at third grade, it's not only a different test, but it's a different group of students. So when you're looking at the performance over time, you need to keep that in mind. So overall, we continue to outperform the state at every grade level in English language arts, math, and science. So, we're really pleased about that. When we look at those 17 assessments that are given, 13 of them, we exceed state performance for the number of students scoring in advanced and proficient by more than 10%, and in some areas by as much as 15 to 17%. So that is due to the teachers in the classrooms and what they're doing with students every single day. As far as growth, that's a new factor that we look at how students are doing over time, taking into account where they performed a particular grade 1 year and over 2 years comparison to peers that performed the same place that they did. And when we look at those growth percentiles, anything below 40 is considered low growth. Anything between 40 and 60 is steady, typical growth, and anything above 60 is high growth. So we're looking at the performance over time, we're looking at the cohorts of students to look at the same students over time, and now we have this other piece that we can look at as far as growth. So it's really important that we take into account the achievement, but the growth factor. So I'm going to focus a little bit on those two pieces as we look more particularly at different grade levels. And the growth percentiles from last year, when we looked at that data as compared to this year, we see steady growth over time. The highest growth that we see in some areas are in mathematics in grades 5 through 8. As you know, that this is our 6th year of Think Math, so those students that are now at the middle school have had the benefit of the Think Math program for their time in the Foxborough Public Schools, which is really important because we look at curriculum and we look at instruction and programming and identify, do we have gaps? And this is also the year where we're studying math as far as our curriculum review cycle too. So taking in that in account, seeing that the high growth there in mathematics, it really shows, I think, a lot of the work that's been done by teachers and professional development in math. In math and science, one other highlight here is that when we look at the number of students that are scoring at advanced in math and science, we see that that has doubled over the last 4 years at grade 6, and in math and science at grade 5. Our greatest gains in the percent of students as far as scoring advanced and proficient in math would be at grade 3, 5, and then in science. And at those particular areas, we see increases of 18% in grade 3, 17% in grade 5 for science. And then at 8, we see growth percentiles not as high as grade 5, but that's an emphasis. We have the new implementation of the St. Bariatric Science. So that's kind of the big picture, but to focus a little bit more by grade level, if we look at just elementary and the English language arts and mathematics for grade 3 and 4, over time, we're seeing consistency, and that we continue to outperform the state by 12%, but we're looking at that performance over time and that it is steady. We also see that where we've had slight increases, if you look at comparative over the last 5 years, say at the state, they're more stagnant, where we've seen some increases in English language arts there in grade 3 and grade 4. If we have the growth factor, which is only at grade 4 because it takes 2 years, you do not have a growth percentile for grade 3. Again, that 60% and higher is high growth, and we have a 54% growth factor when we look at grade 4 in English language arts. But I would kind of talk about elementary and then see if there's some questions about elementary here. As far as in mathematics, we're, like English language art, outperforming the state by 12%. And then we see that nice increase and moving students to advance, an 18% increase there when we look at grade 3. in particular. And that's important because one of the new pieces with the growth percentile is in the past, when we look at the Composite Performance Index, our CPI, if a student scored advanced or if a student scored proficient, they receive the same amount of points when they calculate that CPI. And now with the new measurement, they are giving more points for students scoring advanced. So it's showing the work that we're doing by moving students over from proficient to advanced. The same way any students that we might have in warning, moving them in to needs improvement. So it's looking at the growth and at the same time recognizing, which we felt in the past, we're doing all this work to move students to higher levels, and it really wasn't taken into account, and now it is. And then again, as far as the growth at grade 4, where you can see that for the first time, we have typical growth with, steadily increasing the number of students for advanced. That's general for grade 3 and 4. We will, as Debbie was saying before, we'll focus more specifically on what are some of the things we're looking at when we drill down into that data, as far as the writing and the open response and the short answer and all of those different components, because it's important for us to look, are there any gaps? As we look at the big picture and then drill down specifically, especially where we've had particular focus points, for instance, in math with professional development and targeting. Are we seeing that in the data? Any questions as far as just overall performance of grade 3 and 4?
Amy, just on the grade 3 math, am I reading it right? Advanced and proficient at 73%. I'm looking at the, what page? I guess
Yes.
the back of the second page.
Yes.
Yes. So 36% of our students were advanced in grade 3 or above proficient, as they call it.
That's the only one, as I scan it quickly, that looks like it's down a little from the last couple of years. I'm not sure it's significant, but if I'm reading that right. But now grade 3, are they in Think Math at grade 3? Or?
Yes. Oh, yes.
So, but they haven't had the years of Think Math.
They have,
Right.
actually. No, they
That
have.
group has.
Okay.
Yes.
The Think Math starts in one?
Starts in kindergarten.
In kindergarten.
So that's not an excuse for that.
No, when you look over the last 5 years in math at grade 3, just to kind of look at our own trends and compare it to the state, so where we can see that steady progress, that even though we have a slight decline from 2011, the state also declined by as much. So when you look at it over time, because that was one of the things I wanted to look at, when we start to see slight increases, are we looking at it's just steady or is it stagnant over time? To look back over the last 5 years, yes, we're outperforming the state, but how has the state done over time as well? And in most cases, you see them with a slight decline. There's not any time where we've seen any kind of decline and the state hasn't seen.
Okay.
What I think is significant is that we've increased in the above proficient category, even though the overall advanced and proficient have been reduced a bit.
Yeah, that's
So, I mean, that's
Right. Whether you're
significant too.
looking at
We're
our
moving-
results at the state, you always see a little bit of this because the test does change every year. So
Right.
very often, there'll be 1 or 2 questions that will be very different, or more emphasis on one thing than the other. So it's not, a smooth trajectory line. It usually is a little bit like this. But as Amy said, what we look is we're dipping, but the state didn't. That's a really big concern. So if the state is dipping down a little bit, it could be because of the nature of this year's test or whatever the other myriad of complex factors there.
Yeah, it's not dramatic. It's the only one that as I look at it quickly, it just looks like it dropped from the last couple of years. All the others seem like they've either, maintained or improved. Okay, I'm fine with that.
Okay. Well, moving on to the overall middle school, when we look at English Language Arts and grades 5 through 8, we could look at those numbers, and if you look at the number of students that are advanced and proficient, the numbers look very similar from year to year. And then, kind of look to see in the advanced, are we moving any? They may be similar, but are we shifting more students to advanced? And at grade 5, you don't see that. At grade 6, you do see some of those shifts. And then at grade 7, it's more consistent as far as the percent of students. And then at grade 8, you see actually a decline there. as far as the percent, but you've got to also take into account, we have really high performance. 91% of our students are advanced or proficient. So when you're looking at those numbers, you have to take in all these factors, because that's something really to be proud of, to have 91% of your students advanced or proficient.
So that's amazing. I mean, grade 8, and then they're
We used to see
launching.
only those kinds of things at high school, like at
Yeah,
grade.
and then they're launching to the high school, so that's,
And if you look over time for the middle school, as far as the English language arts advanced proficient, if you were to average those 5 years to kind of see from each year as it moves, we see it increasing from 80 to 83 to 87 to that 91% over the last 5 years, with the growth that's there, which now we can look at the growth and see, as an example, in grade 5, you have the lower growth, but then you look at grade 6, and remember, it takes into 2 years into account, and then you see a growth percentile of 58. So that's just right on the cusp of, high growth. So it's important to take into account all of those factors.
Amy, refresh my memory. What I know 4th grade does the long composition answers. What other grade levels do
Grade
that?
4, grade 7, and grade 10
Okay.
will have the long comp.
And do you tend to see an up or down with those grade levels in the advanced proficient when they have the long written response to do, or is there any correlation there?
It's really more so, you see some dips some years.
Mm-hmm.
You do. But then it goes back and forth again, because it's a different group.
What
of
about when you look at
students.
the cohorts? And I guess I could
Over
look at
time, we
myself,
see
but-
the increases
Okay.
with the cohorts. And then we look specifically and can look at different strands within those different, genre, look at poetry, look at each of the language and literature strands. And we do see increases over time.
Okay. Thank you.
And the other piece too with ELA as compared to math, the progression of it becoming increasingly more difficult with the task, and then as you get to 4th grade, that's new for students. And then they've had more exposure to it by the time they have it in grade 7, so it makes sense that they're going to be more familiar with that type of task on the assessment. Is the math, when we look at that as far as the middle school, kind of highlighted there at the beginning, we've spent a lot of time in math. We've spent a lot of focus on professional development. You've got a program that's been in place where teachers are very comfortable with the program now at this point. They've been able to identify if there's areas that we need to supplement at all, as far as more opportunities for enrichment, more opportunities for the enrichment pieces, the critical thinking, any of those pieces where we feel like with the standards, because you have to remember that a program itself is not written for Massachusetts. So it's very important for us to look at what we have, compare it to the standards that are there, and constantly assess, are we meeting the needs of all of our students? And the teachers have worked really hard, and I think that you can see that within the performance and growth as well as achievement at the middle school levels.
I'm really struck just looking at the math that in grade 6 there's a greater percentage of advanced students last year in 2012 than proficient even,
Right.
which is pretty impressive.
Even the 5th grade, where you don't see as much growth, let's just say, but it's our highest number in advanced
Yeah.
ever. So,
Mhm.
I mean, we made, I think the middle school especially has made great strides boosting, trying to
think
take
they
all
have.
kids, not just
Yeah.
bringing the kids who may need, to get up to
Absolutely.
grade level, bring all kids like up to the next level. So it's kind of nice to see.
I mean, for it to have doubled in the last 4 years is very significant. And it did seem like in the past, those were areas of concern where we weren't
Absolutely.
moving. We went down in 2010 to 49, and came back up. Certainly moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
Right?
That's what we think.
And to continue with middle school, to look at the science. So when we look at science over time, compared to the state in our performance. Again, we outperform the state when we look at advanced and proficient. But if you look at grade 5, we've doubled the number of students scoring advanced from 2011.
That's
We've reduced
amazing.
needs
Just
improvement
thrilled to
and
see.
warning by 14%. And we only anticipate to see continued gains with the new science program that's in place, really looking again at where are our gaps and addressing those. At grade 8, you see a 15% performance over the state as far as looking at advanced proficient. We moved more students into advanced, just as we did in grade 5. So we're optimistic with what we've seen this year, and it's a lot of the work that has been taking place.
And 5th is the first time they get a science test for MCAS, so we're hoping cumulatively over time that our investment in a hands-on inquiry-based science program will continue to pay off. We're thrilled to see this, the first time we really looked to see what was happening with science, so we're hoping that that is the start of a wonderfully dramatic trend and pattern.
And then we move to the high school, as far as the 3 areas. We are high performance when we look at the percent of students. So it's not just what happens in grade 10. It's everything that happens before grade 10. So we have to really look at all of the work that's been done by all teachers prior to students arriving in grade 10. So when you see that high performance there with 94% of our students advanced or proficient and 45% of them advanced. In math, 55% of the students are advanced, and then in science, 27%. A lot of hard work by students and by teachers, and over time, it's something that it builds.
I think those numbers bear repeating. And I like how you said that, Amy, that the grade 10 results are not just indicative of what goes on at grade 10, but what builds to grade 10. But just for the public, again, who don't have the benefit of all the data, ELA, 94% of the students in grade 10 advanced or proficient. Mathematics, 86% advanced or proficient. Science, 81%. So
That's pretty good.
when people want to know how's Foxborough High School doing, to me, that's meaningful.
And I think that, well, I mean, I'm going to make a future, prediction here, but I mean, with the new Singari program too, as these students move up, it'll be really interesting to see the impact on science and technology too, on those.
We're pretty happy with those numbers. I mean,
Yeah.
Oh
yeah, they're
less
awesome.
than 1 out of 10, fewer than 1 out of 10 students isn't meeting the proficient or advanced bar in ELA. Fewer than 2 students out of 10 are meeting in math. So we really do have, quite good numbers when it comes to their exit exam. So we like to see that. If you remember the beginning, the first few years of MCAS, it was really only in 10th grade where kids sort of applied themselves to get over the bar. But now they're really striving. I have to give the kids a lot of credit. They're really striving for the best they can do. And that's what I think we're seeing.
Debbie, to that point, when you look at English Language Arts 2001 and math, 34 needs improvement and 35. And then we're up to 7.
Correct.
For English Language Arts.
And
14 for mathematics, and even science. In 2007, 45% had needs improvement.
Right.
And now we're at 19.
And not to,
It's pretty good.
That's amazing, I think, in just that short span of time from 2000.
and not to take away from the Part 2 piece, but when we look at those, that 5% and those students there, the targeted pieces that are already in place for them, and then when they've taken the retest, we've already seen the success for them because of being able to really individualize what they need and provide those supports for them, so they then, when they take the retest, are successful.
And actually, back to our student Joe's question at the beginning of the night, will the MCAS results include those
Special
results for
education
special
portfolio.
education? Yes, this does include results for students with disabilities, so some of the kids who may need to have a retake for math are students with disabilities that we need to, help them work in the areas that they need to work on and try for the next time. So yes, all of our students are included in these results, every last one of them.
Mrs. Spino, what if we do a portfolio
Yet those are included, not in these numbers we're talking about here, but in the growth and the CPI number that Dr. Burris was talking about. Yes, the portfolios count toward that as well. So sometimes kids need, the portfolio he's talking about is sometimes students who may not take the paper and pencil test have an alternate way to demonstrate what they know through their student work products and exams, and they submit that to the Department of Ed to get their MCAS credit.
So before we look at the next chart that you had in your packet that had a lot of numbers on it, I just wanted to do a reminder of what growth is, because it really is an important factor. And for those at home that may be watching, that as we look at MCAS, the standards in a particular grade, MCAS measures their performance on those particular standards. So the growth over time will look at a student and how they performed in, say, grade 6 math. You can't compare his scores from year to year because it's a different test with different scaled scores. So instead, we look at how did he improve compared to students who performed like him from grade 5 to grade 6. Was he more or less? So you can see overall, if you have someone that's already performing very highly, they may have low growth. You can see low growth because they're performing very highly, whereas if you have somebody that's performing not as high, you might see higher growth, and that's what we want to look at to see what's taken place.
I think that's an important point, because sometimes when we hear growth, we think that means like growth in district scores. But the growth percentage is actually about how much progress students make as compared to their peers across the state. So if I had a similar profile to you last year, how much growth did I make compared to peers who did similarly to me over the last couple of years? So it really is about student growth, not district score numbers going up. So it really is a wonderful way to look at student progress, and much more informative for us, I think, is our students growing at a pace that's greater than typical, greater than average.
And this next slide is just saying pretty much what Debbie said. It's looking at their improvement. So if you do have a student that scored in a particular area and you look at somebody compared to him or her the next year and you see lower growth, and then you continue to see lower growth, well, why is that? We really need to get to the root cause there. Is it because it's curriculum? Is it instruction? What's there? So it can raise flags for us to make sure that we're identifying specific needs of students. Right. And then it also gives us something to strive for as far as you may be doing really well, but we want to see that we continue to have high growth. So it is a target for us overall to say, where are we doing really well and where can we continue to strive?
And we can look at growth for particular groups that are at risk as well. So for example, our students with disabilities in elementary math or middle school math, are they making greater, is their growth greater than students with disabilities across the state, in which case we know our programs are working. If, they may have a score that looks okay to us, but if their growth percentile is lower than students with disabilities who took the math test across the state, then we would know that that's not good enough. So we get lots of information from the growth percentile data.
So this chart is one that you have in your packet, and I just highlight this one because where I had said before that we're looking at performance as far as achievement and growth over time, that yellow highlighted column there is the growth percentile. So we're looking at the overall, but as Debbie said, we can focus in for all of the different groups within those grade levels. And at all grade levels in math and ELA, you have to remember we don't have a growth score for science because it's 2 consecutive years over time. So just as we look at grade 10, a growth percentile, that's taking 7th and 8th grade scores to calculate the growth percentile. But when we look across the board, we're seeing typical to high growth in pretty much every single area. And then the CPI column that's next to that, that figure is calculated based on if a student scored advanced, it's 100 points. So a lot of times it's more important to look at that CPI number because it's really targeting the proficient, the advanced, the needs improvement, and warning. And we want to make sure that as a grade level and as a district, that we're seeing that CPI increase from year to year, aside from just looking at advanced or proficient because of the way it's calculated.
So I know we give you a lot of numbers, but to try to tell a little bit of story about these. So if you look down that yellow column, you see that our greatest growth in terms of student growth percentile occurred in 6th grade math, that's 67, in 8th grade math, 64, and overall, if you look at all grades, mathematics, 56. So we've been putting a lot of emphasis in math, and you see a higher pace of growth in those. But if you look, for example, at grade 10 English Language Arts, you'll see that the CPI, if we were only looking at CPI the way we used to, because we've had CPI in here for a number of years, 98.2 Composite Performance Index is really, really high, because so many of our students do so well in the 10th grade English exam. So 98.2 is so high up there, there's not much room for growth, but if you were just looking at the growth percentile, you see that our growth is just a little under the average of 50. Now, I don't know how, you can't get really big growth numbers when you're this close to the ceiling, but that's why both of those numbers are important. You can see some of the MCAS tests with a really high CPI, but an average growth, which is okay. We accept that because we don't have very many kids that still need improvement. But in other times, you might see two different or very similar CPIs, but you look to the right of it and you'll see the growth in one area is greater than the other. So that tells us something about what's happening in those programs. Does that make sense?
So just to see if I understood, Debbie, so if we look at grade 5 ELA, that was our lowest growth
Yes.
In this particular year's tests.
Yes.
Not to be taken for more than what it's worth.
Correct.
But we're beginning at 87.2, so we're fairly high, but we would say, at least compared to other grades, there's room for more growth there than what we saw this year.
We expect to see at least average growth, even though if we're up there. So yes, we would say that level of growth is not acceptable to us, so we'd like to see more growth in that area.
So grade 5 ELA would be an area we'd target or look at or study some more,
yes,
as an example.
Right.
But we really have to look at both numbers. So like grade 5 math, we're high, but we're still under 50%.
So you can see
growth.
the ELA composite performance index is actually higher in ELA, but the growth is slow. And so it's a little bit lower in math, but our growth is a little bit better. So those two things, they're two different factors that tell us about what we're doing and whether it's having any impact.
Or even like, oh, well, all right, never mind. I'm going down to the all grades, English language, art, language.
Our CPI numbers all being, up in the 80s are all very good.
Yeah, that's
they really are.
Well,
They're
overall,
very
it says
good.
91.9.
Right.
Yeah. So that's excellent.
Almost can't argue with that.
Yeah.
91.9 for all grades English language arts, but that doesn't mean to see if we see a certain area that where our growth percentile is, not significantly less than the 50, which is the average growth percentile, then that's something we would definitely pay attention to. And we've been putting a lot of effort, as you know, the last couple of years into math and then switch into science. So, it's at least good that the things you're really putting a lot of time, effort, and resources into are paying off. But so everything has its cycle of attention, I would say. So.
But the other piece too, when we really look at the growth by looking at our different groups, whether it's students with disabilities, our students that qualify for free or reduced lunch, low income, those are in ELL, our English language learner populations. We look specifically at those students to see, well, what does their growth look like over time at each? And are they making progress? And when we drill down into that, we've seen some nice improvements as far as growth specifically to those, because we're not just looking at the overall. We need to look at all of our populations of students to make sure that we're meeting each of them.
And we can, I think a couple of years ago, or maybe last year, we talked about when you see some scattergrams in here that you can see what the growth is. But when we see it by grade or by class, all the students have a dot. So if you see a cluster of students that have low performance and low growth, you can actually click on it and find out who those students are and see are they all in a particular program, are they integrated into the classroom, are they in a separate instructional environment. We can actually look to see who those kids are. So there are lots and lots of these reports at the school level folks look at and really analyze right down to the student. And also, the other thing too is that if we've got some students, say, with disabilities on IEPs who are showing high growth, well, we want to know who they are. What are we doing for them? Is there a difference? You know, what's going on with them that they're able to show better than typical progress? So we can actually click on those and find out who the students are and whether they have an IEP, whether they don't, and what's going on. Right, Stu?
This slide is just showing by grade level. If we look at English language arts, you have this in your packet as well. But looking at that median, the 40 to 60 is the target as far as to be on target with growth over time. More towards that upper right quadrant is higher growth and higher achievement. So when we look at those as a grade level, we look to see, is there the higher achievement? Is there the higher growth? The same with math. You can see that what we already talked about, where we saw some really high growth in areas, those grades are there to the right of that dotted line.
Can you just go back to the last one? Because it's so hard to understand all this. So this is ELA, right? Oh my God. Yes, this is ELA. You see how all of our bubbles are really getting up toward the top? That means our achievement in ELA is pretty high. But you see the growth is sort of in the average band, we'll call it. And now go to the next slide right away. Okay, so here's math. The bubbles aren't as close to the top for math as they are, but we've got more bubbles trending toward the right, which means we may not be as close to the ceiling, but we're trending toward higher rates of growth. So is that helpful?
Yeah, that's good.
We like to bubble up and to the right. Yeah. That's the goal.
Bubble up and to the right. I like that.
You have in your packet the cohort, so looking at the same students over time.
I was so excited about this page.
I think that
Thank
this
Amy Burdo's
slide
page.
is much easier to get a better idea over time of where our students are. So as we said in the beginning, with our high performance at 10th grade in ELA, math, and science, it happens over time. And you can see that illustrated here. If, for instance, we were focusing on grade 5 for ELA and not seeing as high growth maybe as in other areas. But if you look at those same students, by the time they're in 8th grade, you had 70% of them advanced or proficient. By 8th grade, they're at 91% advanced or proficient. In math, if you look at the 4th graders that we were talking about before, just 2 years later, you're going from 46% and seeing 70% of those scoring advanced proficient. And in science, because you have to jump, it's only given in 8th grade and then 10th grade. If you look at, say, in 2009, 57% of them were advanced proficient. That same group of students in grade 10 were at 86%. And then respectively, grade 2010, you see over time those students. And in grade 10, you've got a number of factors that go on. It takes into account, it counts. So some students will take it a little bit more seriously because they know that it counts. And it's more cumulative over time of everything that they've learned over time.
Is your arrow on the print? So
the arrow on the print is off.
The one in the middle. The 46 should be pointing to the 70, correct?
The 46 should be going to the 65 on your print.
Instead of the 77.
46.
So if you look on your print,
or it could go to the 70 in grade.
It could go to right.
Or 46 to 70.
Right. It really should go to this column here. Sometimes it doesn't.
More
to that one.
The arrow on your print is off, but if you look on the screen, it is correct.
Got it.
Yes.
All right. So we just put the arrow up there.
It's on.
Do you suppose all districts show this kind of progression?
No.
I don't know.
It'd be interesting.
Not necessarily.
I don't know because we don't have all of the access to everything that they have, nor do we want to spend time analyzing the results.
No, nor do we want you to. I just wonder if, we're getting smarter at how we handle the MCAS across all districts in the state, or if we're really sitting on a really pretty special thing here, and I'm just curious.
Well, do the state numbers play out similarly across age groups?
When I did 5 years worth in looking at the state. If I saw an area, just very generally speaking, that it looked like we were pretty steady. When I looked at the state, I saw a slight decline over the 5 years. And then if I saw that we had a slight increase, the state was stagnant or decreased over time. So that tells me as we're really putting the emphasis there, we're seeing some improvement where, I can't speak to other districts, but if you look collectively over the state, you see it might be, we might think, oh, we only have slight declines, but the greater state is stagnant, or they've actually decreased.
Thank you.
I agree with Bevy. I think this is a pretty cool chart.
I was so excited when I
This is one that
saw that
merits,
page.
some more sharing with the public. I don't know if the reporter is the right place to put it, or through, I know, you'll do some stuff with the parent leaders, but I think this is a nice, easy one to read, meaningful, and new. It's a new way to view it, so kudos, Amy, for the chart.
There's a lot of numbers to digest.
I know, but
Yeah, you've
to
given us
see-
more, it seems like,
To see
this
that
year.
progression is so exciting.
But that's what people look for, too. They're looking to see, how do we do last year, and how do we compare, and are we moving in the right direction? And I mean, your data surely supports that, so.
And I think this too, that,
Yes.
you had this last year, didn't you? Yes.
Oh, did you?
Yeah,
Okay.
so, but what
Shows how well we
is,
remember.
I know, really.
right, she did have it last year, because I remember when she showed it to me last year being her first year, I was like, that's fabulous, put that in. I think what this shows is not just how strong we're doing as a district, but it does show that we keep saying that all the MCAS tests are cumulative, but this really shows that it is in a very concrete way. Well, thank you very much for all your numbers. So Amy and her team will be coming back to the next meeting with more curriculum and instruction type analysis and what they have gleaned from their more detailed information.
And I'd just like to say one last piece, if I may. The teachers really, with all of the curriculum work, we talked about it during the summer, they have spent a lot of time with standards and looking at where students are. So a lot of effort. It's not just what you see here, it's what we see daily in classrooms. There's been a lot of work, and seeing what they've done firsthand, they really should be commended for the work that they've done.
So Amy, data aside, just kind of more qualitatively, how do you feel about the results to the extent you've dug into them so far?
I feel really good about the results that we have here. I think that where we've expected to see improvement, we've seen it based on the diligent efforts of the teachers and then, the students and what they're doing. There's been a lot of emphasis in math, and we've seen some great growth and some nice achievement looking at both of those in math. And when you put that much energy into something, and obviously it was there before I came on last year, I was able to see it firsthand last year and to see what the teachers were doing this summer. But under the direction of Allison Mello, a ton of work has been done, and then Sue Carl at the high school too. You hate just to go towards one particular content area, but there really's been a lot of emphasis. So it's nice to see the rewards that are there based on what they put into.
Mrs. Abrams happens to live and breathe math data as well, so have to say they've all been really focused on it, and I was particularly thrilled with the 5th grade science, so that's what made me the happiest, quite honestly.
I like my refrigerator page.
Okay.
That's my vote. Joe?
So the thing is that, when we have the MCAS analyzes and the baseline and benchmark report, are we gonna have that in the both meeting or from a separate meeting?
I'll tell you right now, but I'll tell the committee, how's that?
Yeah.
So just to sum up where we are, the next meeting will be the department heads and the coordinators with their analysis, as I've already said 3 times. The baselines and benchmarks report, we've talked about, we're going to morph that into the district report card, and we thought this is a good time to do it because it's part of the strategic plan to do that, so it's timely. It is the interest of the committee and the strategic planning group to do so. It is also in our interest to do so. And as it turns out, it happens to be more timely than we think, because Amy's been meeting with folks, and we met today talking about, new 3-year benchmarks, but what we realized is that, as you know, with the new Common Core and there's new national park assessments coming forward, 2014, so we actually have only one more year. That's it, one more year of MCAS. So it doesn't make any sense to set new 3-year goals for MCAS, which is about half, let's say, of the baselines and benchmarks report, because everything's resetting. It's a new national exam. It's going to be online. It's completely new and different. So everything MCAS related, which is the bulk of our data, I'd say half of our data, is going to be changed up. So this is a good time to convert it to a district report card to report on how we're doing kind of on an annual basis. But a lot of our data can't continue in the form it is anyway, because that test is going away. And then it'll be replaced by the national park exams. So.
And there will be shifts there.
2014.
So MCAS, is we talked about the standards, it measures students at each grade level against the standards. The park assessment will not measure against the standards, it will measure students' readiness, college and career ready. So looking at very different, it will be a very different look at.
Just when you get the hang of it.
Exactly, I was just going to say that. They turn it on you, and now it's,
Right.
so that'll be a new challenge for.
Completely new. In fact,
all of you.
well, just to show you how challenging it is, because they're developing these park assessments, but I just got a survey today, they want people to participate in the state in how to define college and career ready. So I think that is fascinating, because now you're asking us this week, can we all come to agreement on how we define college and career readiness, but they're already creating the exam that says they're going to assess students' ability, college and career readiness nationwide. So, you know, we just take it one day at a time, basically.
So my 4th grader at home, when I was explaining to my 9th grader, you'll be the last one to take MCAS in its current form next year. She said, I always have to be the one that has to take it, so she will take it. And then my 4th grader said, well, then what will I take? And I explained that there will be a new assessment, this park assessment, and that it will measure to see if you're college or career ready. And her question was, how do you know if I'm ready for college if I'm in the 4th grade?
Yeah.
This is a very wise question.
It is.
But that's what the 2 C's in park stand for, readiness for college and career. Yeah. So, new day.
I have one more question, general question, and I probably ask this every year. And so Debbie, you can remind me what the rationale is. But, you know, I think comparing ourselves to the state average is a good measure, but I'm always finding that I'd like us to compare ourselves to something higher than the state average. And maybe that's not right, but would it be appropriate, for example, to compare us to other districts that spend per pupil somewhere in the general ballpark of what we spend? Because to me, when we compare ourselves to the state average, I have higher aspirations than that comparison.
Well, when we say we compare to the state average, we don't mean just that we want to do better than the state average. What we're looking at is relative comparison. So, for example, if we're 17 points above the state average, we feel much better about that than being 5 points above the state average. So we don't ever, when she says above the state average, or I say above, we don't mean that we're just happy to be above the state average. What we're looking at is how far above it relatively are we, so that we know we're stronger in the areas that we're much farther above where most people are rather than lower. Does that make sense? So that's the...
It makes sense, and I've never ever heard you be content being 2% above the state average.
No.
But when we use the state average as the denominator, it still, to me, is not what I want to compare ourselves to.
Well,
so we can say, you know what, it's great, we're 17% above the state average, but I still don't know how meaningful that is, you know?
Well, it's one of the few things that we actually can look at for relative performance, to say where are we relatively stronger and where are we relatively weaker. The challenge we always have is that it's not just to compare ourselves to other districts that spend exactly what we spend or similar. There are about 8 or 9 socioeconomic factors that is considered by statisticians and research people about how, at least, because they've done this for years and they stopped doing it because it became too complex into them. But it's socioeconomic status of the district. It's percent of students who have IEPs. It is the per pupil spending. It's also the average income in the town. It is the ethnic diversity of the town. It is the percentage of students on free reduced lunch. It is also the education level of the families in the town. That towns that have higher education levels tend to do better. Their children tend to do better. And the 8th one is, I know there's at least 8, so I pumped off 7 off the top of my head.
That was pretty good.
That's very
ethnic
impressive.
diversity, I got pretty much, oh, English, percent of students who don't speak English as a first language. So that's the big 8, I'll call it. So what we would have to do is find districts who are similar to us in most, if not all, of those 8 factors, and then see how we're doing compared to them. And so that is, I'll just say, a capacity issue that, given everything else we're doing, isn't what we've chosen to do. It's not impossible to do, but I don't know if it would inform you any more than this type of analysis would. But it might, but I don't, we could maybe find, 6 or 7 districts that are similar to us when you put those composites together. But that would mean that we would have to decide how far away from those factors do you want to get. So we'd have to become statisticians ourselves to know that if what we were making decisions on in the districts we were selecting are actually statistically significant and correct. And, that takes a real high level of analysis with people who do just research and statistics. So we could do it, it's not impossible, but I don't know how much
value we'd get.
Yeah.
exactly.
The amount of time
Those
it
are
would
really
take.
the 8 factors that we are supposed to take into consideration when you're looking for districts that are similar to you. And that is, there's UMass Donahue Institute who does a lot of that research, used to a couple of decades ago. And so the factors are pretty much agreed upon that people should compare themselves to. So it's not, and that's why it's always tricky when people compare any district to someone who is geographically adjacent to you. You could be 2 totally different worlds, just because you share a border. So those are really the 8 main factors, and there's probably another few as well.
Well, and the factors that go into what makes up the per pupil expenditure, does that vary from town to town?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's not an apples to apples comparison necessarily.
It isn't.
And I think the other piece too, with that level of data analysis that we look at from the curriculum standpoint, when we may have similar scores, say in math, compared to a town that might have the socioeconomic status is the same, and some of those other factors that Debbie mentioned, they may get to that point very differently than we do. That's why it's so important for us to look at what standards. Is it number sense, if we're talking math? Is it fractions? What area? Because that, all of the objectives and the strands within math, where we may be high performing, another district that might look similar to us is lower, and vice versa. So it really is more about looking at where are we and identifying any gaps that we might have programmatically and addressing those.
And that's your process of drilling down, right? And what you'll be presenting at the next meeting.
Yes.
Yeah. That's a really interesting comment,
As one of the examples, not to get too specific, but we looked at an area, fractions, and we wanted to see where students are performing at different grades, more at a vertical piece. So last year, we had a same task. It was that problem with fractions, and we gave that task to 5th graders through 8th graders, knowing at what point, at what level that they should be able to calculate that the particular problem. And we were able to see 5th grade through 8th grade, they were answering, and to make it simple, at the same place correctly. Well, they shouldn't have, based on the standards for each of those grades. So that gave us a window to, well, what are we not doing as much at a particular grade level and more at another, and then gave that task again later on after direct teaching in that area to be able to see. And it helped to focus 5th grade teachers versus 6th, 7th, and 8th. At what level are they working in the concept of applying fractions?
Thank you.
Kate? Hi, I'm Kate Kaminsky, former school committee member. Bruce, you asked a great question, and I think that is something that we have been doing over a number of years. When Larry Harrington and Martha Slattery were chairs, I know you weren't on the committee yet, but Katie, you were there, and Bevy. We had many discussions about what the benchmarks should be and do we compare ourselves with others. And I'm under the impression that we give that information every year to the advisory committee. In fact, Larry Thomas, you can say whether or not you got it last year, where we look at per pupil expenditures, we look at MCAS. I mean, that's what Paul Jackson has done for us, and Bill
did it
Yupno, I'm
last
sure,
year.
will continue that tradition. I agree, you don't want to drill down to 8 levels of categories, because you know what, at the end of the day, I may want to know what a Weston is if we're high enough up on the MCAS list, but we're not per pupil and the demographics are not the same as Foxborough. But at the end of the day, you know, I don't want the staff to have to spend time analyzing their data, but I do want to know, okay, if we're at 86 on math, how can we get to be, you know, 90 or 92, particularly since this group funded a math specialist. So I think we have that data, and I would encourage us to continue to use those benchmarks. They're not ideal, but we can take a look at all those in the Hockomock, and I think we have Weston and a few other of the high W towns that we like to, you know, flirt with. We're not there, but I think we should look at that data, and we do supply it to the
We do
advisory
give it
committee.
to the advisory committee because they like it, but they like the Hockomock, with a few extras thrown in, like, but not too far away. However, I just want to state what the reality is. So yes, we give it to the advisory committee because they like it, but it doesn't tell you whether those communities are similar to us. So they're just geographically close to us. So I'm not sure. I mean, I know people like it, and they like to know how we're doing as compared with the Hawk, because that's what people are familiar with. So but it's kind of interesting that people have a comfort level with a league, if you will, created through athletics, and we're going to use the same league to compare ourselves academically. I don't know how helpful it is, but people like it. So that's what I can say, and we do a few others. I think Westwood's in there. There's no Western, but Westwood I think is in there. We still do supply it every year. I'm just not sure how much value it has, because no one who receives that report really understands those 8 socioeconomic characteristics of all of those towns and us to see what it means. So we don't really know what it means, but we still share it every year because it seems to be a fan favorite.
And I hope we continue to do so, because I think that's what we need to do to show the taxpayers we're serious, and to show that to the advisory, and to show if we really are concerned about student
I
achievement.
just want to caution people it can be misleading.
Thank you.
Well, and I think that was, I mean, Larry can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think when it was given to us, it was given to us with those qualifiers, and, you know, it is what it is, and take it with a grain of salt kind of advice from Paul Jackson and Bill. When it is interesting to see what other communities are spending and what other communities are doing, but you have to take into consideration the other factors.
Interesting. I think, though, sometimes there's so much information, there's so many numbers everywhere, and that I find everything interesting to look at, but I'm more often not sure what it means.
Exactly.
I'm interested in it.
Well, I think it's...
And I find it fascinating, but I don't know what it means.
Exactly, and I'm sorry, Deb, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I guess that's the concern that how people draw conclusions from that data.
Yes.
So we want to be sure about those kinds of things, because we can't maybe necessarily make conclusions from that.
Yeah, usually in my mind, it leads to more
simplistic.
questions.
Right.
So, you know, what does that mean? Is there something we could be learning from that? That's where it leads to, that's what it leads to for us.
Right.
I mean, I think generally when I've looked at that data, again, Larry, correct me if I'm wrong, my assessment was that we're getting a lot of bang for our buck.
That's what the
here in
advisory committee
Foxborough.
seems to come up with every year, which we do too when we look at it, is we always use the phrase good value for your dollar.
Yeah.
In Foxborough, I think that data certainly does lead you to conclude that. Hopefully this year it will too.
Yeah.
But as far as more detailed analysis about what somebody else doing that has a better bump in math, is there another community similar to us that's getting better results, worse? Are we doing something better than some other similar population communities? That part, the Hawk won't tell you. That just looking at the Hockomock League won't tell you. But it's another data point that is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I guess what I would maybe just conclude, Amy, is if there are comparisons you think are meaningful, it'd be interesting to see them. It doesn't have to be the Hawk from my perspective, personally speaking. I certainly don't want the same level of analysis. But if you think about how do we benchmark ourselves, is there a way to benchmark ourselves beyond just the state average? And the answer might be no, for all the reasons you've said, Deb. So I would leave it open-ended, as, you know, it'd be an interesting comparison if there was a way that was meaningful to do it. And if not, then no is the answer.
Yeah, I mean, we know people from a lot of, I don't know any other district that compares themselves to other districts for purpose, I just don't. I mean, that being said, not in a detailed global way, that being said, even years ago when we were struggling with, let's say, math, we're going to pay attention to it. We certainly do pursue who's doing well in that area and what are they doing, and we reach out that way. So I'm not saying we don't ever do it. We certainly do it all the time.
Sure.
But not in terms of really providing formal data comparisons against, you know, to and from and across districts. We don't know anyone who does that.
And I wouldn't think we'd want to spend a lot of time on that. It's going to change year after year, grade by grade, cohort by
Right.
cohort. So I understand.
And that's just as an example too, today we had our first meeting of the K-12 program review for math, since this is that year, and really setting what our charge was for the year and what we're going to be collecting as far as information, background information first, to kind of a state of the state and really look at all of our populations of students. And within that analysis, we will be studying very specifically if we have a population of students at a particular grade and we don't feel that we're as high as that we'd like to be, why is that? And then look to other places to see if they're doing particularly well with special education students or English language learner students, and why is that? So we will be doing a very in-depth study this year in math as part of that K-12 program review.
Thank you.
So to sum up, this year you're actually going to have 3 parts. You're going to have the trends next time, and then 2 meetings from now you'll have the district report card to look at as a draft to see how that comes about, because we did want to get that done in November. So we're actually going to do a 3-parter because it's almost an explosion of information at this point. So we'll wait and do the district report card a month from now, because we need still some time to work on it. It's a totally new format, so we're starting to work on that now, incorporating the baselines and benchmarks report.
Thank you, Amy. You did fantastic collection of information. Thank you.
Actually, Massachusetts, I think, is one of the highest in the state for their levels, right?
We're always number 1 in ELA and math, in science.
Throughout the whole country.
Correct.
Who's second?
Bruce? Throughout the whole country.
Who's been second? In the
So, I mean, what else are we going to compare? And if we're number 1 in the country, we're beating the number 1 in the country.
Okay. I'm sorry, I was just kind of curious.
We were for summer, but I'm not sure.
But we are almost consistently.
Massachusetts has the most rigorous state assessment, the closest correlation of assessment to the actual standards, and then the highest performance overall when you look at the NAEP, which allows you to compare state to state. And that's one of the pieces with the park, is now the comparison by having the same test across the state, instead of us saying, I mean, in the past, Massachusetts might feel as though that we're not performing as high, and then you look at other states and the level of rigor in their state assessment is not what Massachusetts has.
It really isn't. It isn't.
I know.
Through all of the studies, the most rigorous, closest correlation to the actual standard, and then the highest achievement on the NAEP.
Right. Okay. Superintendent's 2012-2013 goals. Spinell.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. To follow up on our previous conversations about the new educator evaluation system in Massachusetts, which of course applies to me and every teacher and administrator in the state and the Commonwealth. So as this part of the start of the new cycle, you had my review in September last month, and then as part of that we discussed what areas I would focus on for my goals. So I do have a lot of goals this year, but I couldn't figure out how to drop off any of them. So in the future you might not see 6, but with the new educator evaluation system coming in, there are just some things that just must be there. So this is a draft of my goals for your comment and input. They were developed in response to the most current needs of the district and to address our improvement plans. And additionally, they acknowledge the tremendous support, time, and effort that will be necessary really on all of our parts to successfully implement the new Massachusetts educator evaluation system. So for the purposes of people watching at home, I don't know if someone else would like to read my goals, or if you'd like me to read them. I'll go ahead and read them. All right.
Your goals.
Yes. And this new system requires that there be at least one goal in each category of professional practice, student learning, and district improvement. And then there's also the fourth category called other. So my professional practice goal, which means what am I going to do personally as a professional in my role? To provide targeted and differentiated support for administrators' leadership growth and development by identifying large group and individual needs through administrators' self-assessment and the development of their professional practice goals to be measured by administrators' evidence of progress towards those goals. So I'm currently working with administrators and principals. They're doing their goal setting as part of the new system, and I'm helping them through that. And I also want to make sure that we're all focused on the things that are important to the district for district improvement. So it could be a need that they have now in their own professional practice, could be related to one of those 3 key strategies. This is, if you remember the superintendent's entry plan, I came out with 3 key strategies that we believe are going to get us from great to greater. And the first one was about leadership growth and development of both teachers and administrators. So this speaks directly to that. If anybody wants to question or comment, or I'll just keep reading. The student learning goal, which is kicking in this year, is, and I made this a 2-year goal because we don't want I don't want to give the committee the impression that we do quick goals, we do something, we check off a list, and then we're done. So this is an area that we're going to be paying attention to for a number of years. For now, I think this is just a 2-year goal. By June 2014, the number of district-wide opportunities for advanced learning, enrichment, and challenge, as outlined in the Superintendent's Entry Plan Strategy Number 2, will increase by at least 20% at each level. You can see I've got baseline data there and what the numerical goal would be for each level. And I separate it by level because we don't want to treat this globally.
Debbie, I have 2 questions on that one. You want to take them now, or you want to go through all of them?
Right now is fine.
So your intent would be that at the end of the first year, though, we would assess, knowing that we won't expect all the goals to be met, but we want to assess progress?
Yes.
Okay. And my second question is, in light of the elementary principals' comments, I remember us commenting at a recent meeting that they all were so focused on this.
Yes.
I'm sure you are, but I'll ask the question anyway. You think 20% at each level is right, as opposed to, say, a higher percent at the elementary level?
They may have a higher percent at the elementary level. I think with this, well, you won't see it, but I know I will see a similar worded goal on many, if not, all of the elementary principals, certainly, yes. Because they all had that in their culture and climate goals shared.
Right.
So whether they choose, a more aggressive percentage, I wouldn't doubt it. But for me, overseeing this from a higher level, that I want to see improvement all 3 levels, not just their one building or their shared level. So for me, I hope to certainly exceed that, because the elementary, I think, is starting at a little bit lower number of opportunities than we see at the other levels.
Okay.
Under district improvement, goal number 3, to closely monitor and publicly report progress toward district improvement as measured by the district's strategic plan and the superintendent's entry plan 3 key strategies by developing a district report card by December 1st, 2012, by reporting progress on the strategic plan and the entry plan strategy action steps twice a year. So my plan is sometime mid-year at one of these meetings, you had in our shared goals, we want a mid-year and end-of-year update on the strategic plan. So I will include how I'm coming along with the 3 key strategies along with that, because they do dovetail together. The 3 strategies support the district strategic plan as well. District improvement goal number 4, to facilitate the professional growth of teachers by seeking ongoing feedback 3 times a year on the implementation of the new Massachusetts Educator Evaluation System and working with the administrative team to meet those needs throughout the year. So this is a deliberate goal so that we're not just, reacting one step at a time throughout the year with the new system. We just met today with someone who's helping us do this, but we're going to seek feedback from teachers about each segment of it. So right now, teachers are finishing up their goal setting with their supervisors. So we're going to ask them specifically about the activities in the first couple months of the year. How did you find writing SMART goals? What other help do you need? How did it go? Getting a lot of feedback about where they are, what was what was challenging, what was easier than they thought, all the feedback that we need. And then going forward, what help do you need from us? So we're a little bit more proactive about it. And then we'll do another mid-year check-in. How's the documentation and the collection of evidence going? How do they feel about the classroom walkthroughs? How do they feel about the formal observations? All of the components in the system so that we know how it's going. And we have our working group, or we call it our Educator Evaluation Working Group, which is 18 people in the district that met twice a month all last year. We're already meeting again with them. They're staying on for 2 years to help us with implementation. It's 12 teachers and 6 administrators, and we'll bring all that back to them so that we can plan ongoing support, and then at the end of the year to find out how the first year went and help us with information and tweak it. So I'm working on a method to collect that information from our teachers so that we can sort of react in a more ongoing fashion and be there to support rather than just hope for the best and then hear about the problems when they occur. We want to be a little bit more proactive in that. Goal number 5, to facilitate and support the implementation of the new Massachusetts Administrator Evaluation System to ensure that all district administrators are evaluated according to the new process and standards for the 2012-13 school year, as measured by the completion of all evaluations by September 30th. So as you know, I'm the only one that was evaluated with the new system for this past year, thanks to you and the committee's willingness to invest all the time and effort to learn it and devote your time diligently to that. So we want to make sure everyone is converted to the new system for this year. Everyone's starting off. We're all on pace so far. And I need to make sure, I need to be able to ensure that all administrators are evaluated using the new system this year. Last year we did have a hybrid that I told you about to get people used to some of it. And then last, I don't have to have other goals, but I do have a very important goal, I think, which is to successfully conduct and conclude contract negotiations with professional educators by September 1st, 2013, resulting in a new collective bargaining agreement. So as you know, we're starting bargaining with our biggest association this year, and it's very important to us to have that wrapped up at the start of school. We don't want to be like many of the districts you read about where they're working without a contract or another year goes by and then all that breaks down. So those are my 6 goals. Awesome.
Excellent goal.
In addition to all the other goals we have in all the other locations.
Yeah.
These are my personal goals.
Excellent.
Comments?
They're excellent.
I think they're concise and impressive and...
Okay. Wish me luck then.
Yes.
Good luck.
So I did put it on the exact same thing you're used to seeing,
Yeah, I
so
like
you'll
that.
see this in the end of the year as well. So might as well start off doing it the way we used to see.
And please let us know what we can help.
That's right, to help you
Very much
achieve your
appreciate
goals.
Or the other administrators, because it's
Oh, it's going to be a busy year.
gonna be busy. And now for our update on enrollment, please.
Bev, excuse me for
Oh,
interrupting.
sorry.
We don't need a, I'm sorry. We don't need a motion to approve, do we? Just consensus, do you think?
This is a
Yeah.
good question.
I would say
System.
consensus.
I think consensus is fine.
I think consensus is fine. So we agree that we accept that?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. By consensus.
Okay. October 1st enrollment. You can see our enrollment has declined, a little bit. So our total enrollment right now is 2,793 students. And if you look across the bottom, you can see that our class sizes, I think the largest class size we ever had was about 245 a few years ago, or 240 in that vicinity. And maybe that wasn't even by the time of graduation, but that was when they were in elementary and middle school, I think. But you can see from grades, say 4 through 12, that we roughly have close to 200 to 230 students. We don't vary a whole lot in there, but you can see the first, you can't go by kindergarten because we always grow a lot of kids from kindergarten to first grade, because we had about that last year and we're 186. You can see in first grade we have 186 students currently and 181 in second grade. So you can see there's a trend towards smaller class sizes in our first and second graders. And we're really going to watch that closely because it is, as we've discussed at this table before, it's becoming less and less predictable class sizes based on who's living here when kids start school. So we still see a lot of things happening as a result of the economy, which is families moving in, not in time for school, but often they do, but sometimes transferring in, so when they're able to move into town. So we don't know if that will stay the same or if we'll see that growing a little bit over time, but we'll certainly watch that. But if that trend continues, then I think we will see a declining enrollment over time. But we'll see. So we have about 15 to 20 fewer students in first and second grade than we have historically seen. So overall, we're probably about 30 students in those two grades, or about 30 students now. Unfortunately, I just want to make sure somebody's going to read that and say, well, good, that's one less teacher. But no, there's 30 students in 2 different grade levels across 3 schools. So you'd have to divide it 6 ways. Ish.
Debbie, I'm just curious, and this goes kind of back to our MCAS discussion, so I'm sorry for backtracking, but if the class sizes stay lower, on the lower end of things, going forward, say with the group that's in first and second grade, when they get in third and fourth and fifth grade, is that a factor that you'll take into consideration when looking at their cohorts over time, that they are in smaller class sizes in connection with their, scores? I'm just
Not in
curious.
actual smaller classroom sizes. Our class sizes have been very stable.
Consistent.
Over time.
But if there are
So
fewer students.
It's one fewer section, typically.
Okay.
So that doesn't really have a big effect.
No.
So let's say in 5th grade, if there were 11 sections or 12 sections and they're down to 11, or 11 is down to 10 sections, they almost don't know it. They don't really realize.
That's a good point, just for people hearing that the enrollment is going down, or,
Yes.
that we don't have the same number of sections.
No.
If we have a lower
No,
number
for
of students.
example, we used to
So-
have 5 first grade sections at the IGO. We only have 4 now. So you definitely will see fewer classrooms.
So the class sizes aren't going down, the
No.
enrollment is going
Yeah,
down?
that's correct.
Okay.
That's right. Very good. Yeah. And if we don't need that many sections at a particular school, we don't have it.
Okay?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Other questions? No. I guess we are moving on to other matters. Other matters, Tina? Any other matters?
I am happy to report that the NEASC report is finally in.
Oh.
Yes, as of today. So Diana received it, she sent it to me, gave it to Wendy, so I haven't had a chance to read the Bible, but we're happy that it's in, so we would like to put it on the school committee agenda for the next meeting.
Excellent.
Excellent.
So Mrs. Myers-Packle and I will be looking at that, and Amy, and looking through the whole report, and she is going to be presenting the NEASC report findings on November 5th. So that'll be a quite a long meeting. That'll be
Quite a long meeting, November 5th is going to be a long meeting.
Well, MCAS Part 2 and NEASC alone are 2, we call them media items.
So we
two
should be
media
careful of how many
Meeting items.
agenda items we have on
Yes.
that evening.
So, Willie, be
I'll be
prepared.
calling out sick that day.
I'm expecting a lot of comments. What do you mean? So it's always good to find out what's in the report and what direction that they're recommending. So that'll actually be fascinating, I think. So feel free to weigh in.
I didn't get
Forward to that.
Because you have been in the high school during all of these major changes that have happened, so to see it reflected back in a report, you might find interesting. Anybody else?
I don't have anything.
I have just a reminder that the FMA cookout is at 5 o'clock just before the homecoming game, and we are all
Yes, the
cordially
Music Association.
invited by the Music Association. And I want to say that the Spanish exchange is working successfully. I had a chance, the privilege of taking the group to Plymouth Village, which is a perfect morning to water up Plymouth Village, and then we saw the Mayflower this afternoon. And I want to thank Tina very much for joining the reception to welcome them. That meant a lot to Senorita Smith that you were able to come. And for those of you who don't know, they were standing at the airport on Wednesday evening waiting for their baggage. And 5 Spanish names were announced over the PA. They went and they were told, well, the plane in Spain was overweight, so we arbitrarily took suitcases off. So 1 teacher and 4 students had no suitcases. They were supposed to arrive that night. They'd made a trip. Mrs. Eaton had to take Ivy to the airport the next day. Iberia was closed, didn't have a flight. Anyway, the saga goes on and on. Finally, Senorita Smith drove Friday night into the airport with Ida, and they finally retrieved their bags by Friday. But in the meantime, special thanks go to Sheila Sneed, who was helping, trying to write a fax, send it internationally, which we cannot do it from anywhere in the school system or the town hall. So a thank you goes to TD Bank, who said, yes, you may come and we will fax this internationally for you, and they,
It's good
no
for
charge.
the taxpayers to know that we cannot call overseas from school.
That's right. But it's all, I mean, the town gets behind, when we run good programs, the town is behind us and supports it.
So, I did have one more quick thing.
Okay.
Spirit Day today at the high school. I never saw so many cape and superhero costumes ever. So I thought it was awesome. Where's your costume?
I'm actually still wearing it.
Oh, great!
Please show us.
Yes!
The cape's in the car, though.
Look at it. Awesome. That was terrific. I thought it was great. I love to see that, Spirit Day. So we even saw some adults in superhero type costumes, and they seemed awfully comfy. So I think you might see that. But good for you guys. It's a great day at Foxborough High School.
Deb, you remind me that I was here for the reception on Thursday, and it was the Stay Strong, or the Be Strong, I'm sorry,
Student
Be
Strong,
Strong.
right.
So it was nice to see everybody in their T-shirts and the staff in their
And the
T-shirts.
staff came and
That was cool.
Superhero was even better.
Very cool. Yeah,
I have to
the
say.
superhero trumps that, but the Be Strong program was alive and well. It was nice to see it in action.
It is. It's really good. That's
And
going really well.
hopefully there will be an article and a photo in this week's Reporter for that.
Okay.
Which is good. And then on a personal level, I would like to thank everybody in town who has supported me for the past 9 months while my son has been in Afghanistan, and especially for those who stepped up when Bill realized that 36 of his men and women, his soldiers, halfway through the deployment had not received one care package. Those of you who have stepped up and made sure those young people had care packages while they were away. And right now, he's about getting up. It's already Tuesday morning in Afghanistan, so within the next 12 hours, I hope he will be leaving Afghanistan. And maybe by the time I see you tomorrow morning, I will have received a text that he's in Uzbekistan. So thank you. Thank you for your prayers and for your support. I greatly appreciate that. Well, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion
Katie?
to adjourn?
I will second.
Meeting adjourned.